Ah, here we are. Okay. I was waiting for the on-air thing to appear, and the whole system just sort of froze for a moment, and you're just staring there, and it says off-air. So we probably just started with like 5 minutes of dead silence, which is always a good start. Yeah, you can tell we're as engaged as anyone.
Are we doing this yet?
So this is, I've already lost track of the episode number. Eight. Because episode number 8 of Pierre the Chef. Wanted to start off before we get into the main substance today. Because our subject today is not going to be the most cheery, so I want to start with something a little bit happier, a little bit more, a little bit more positive. Last weekend, Labor Day weekend, I reached one of the yet another milestone of parenthood. I took a child off to start college.
Wow.
Yeah. Took Samantha up to Boston and attending Northeastern University.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, I was got moved in. It's not a great view outside of the where she is, but as long as you don't look down, you're fine. But it's a lot of the mechanical stuff from behind the building in that area. But she's happy to be there. She's just getting a lot of people. We had a little bit of a rough spot getting up there. They got a flat tire about 30 minutes into the trip because we headed up separately. We had too much stuff to put in one car, so we ended up heading up separately. And then they ended up getting a flat tire and had to get it replaced, which they were fairly lucky to be able to do that at like 6 o'clock on a Friday on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
They got a used tire and were able to complete the trip. Said they used the redneck method to remove the old one because the old one blew the sidewall. They didn't have the tool to remove the tire, so they drove over it with a Jeep to pop it off. Pop it off the wheel. But but we got up there, moving into the dorm. It was a drizzly day, but it was pretty good overall. But so that was last weekend. That went up on Friday and came back home on Monday. So it's a little bit different without suddenly she's not in the house anymore.
Yeah.
It's I'm actually working on writing something that when I get it complete will probably be on my website about the whole thing, reflecting on it a bit. But one thing I wanted to just mention, or just wanted to share, was for some reason in like the week or so up to bringing her up, there's this one thing with her that kept circling around in my mind. And I don't know why this is the story that came to mind, because it's not like the most representative or the most insightful or anything, but it's just one that it just makes me smile. This was a couple years ago, right after we got one of our kittens, probably Smokey, the gray nightmare, Terror and Ash. She can be unfriendly sometimes. Yeah, you'll pick her up and she'll start growling immediately. But at the time, she was a kitten and she was all cute as fuck and everyone loved her. And we were having family dinner, and Sam tells a story about how she was playing with the kitten, and the kitten suddenly wrapped both front paws around her arm and raked along her arm with her back legs. Didn't put the claws out, but the sort of like thing I'm talking about. And Samantha said that was so cute, and I said that's actually a hunting instinct. A lot of felines have, but they do that trying to rake the belly of their prey, trying to claw them open. And then the injury, blood loss, whatever, it helps to weaken the prey. Sometimes they can even just let it escape and follow it till it bleeds out. But that raking of the back claws is a hunting instinct meant to kill prey. And Samantha looked at her plate, and she considered that for a moment. And then she looked up at me and said, "Well, thanks for ruining that, Dr. Science," and didn't say another word about the cats for the rest of the meal. And that, I don't know why that's the memory that kept circling around my head, but that's the one. I don't know if that was because she was picking up my sarcasm or something, but that's the memory that I kept remembering. It kept coming back to me in the lead up before we took her out. Yeah, take her up to Boston.
Dr. Science. Dr. Science ruins everything.
Yeah, those damn facts.
That is true, though. I mean, if your cat was the size of a tiger, you'd be dead.
Yeah. So, just wanted to share that. It's a little bit bittersweet taking a child off to college, not having him in the house anymore, but it's kind of inevitable. And just wanted to share that. Give something a little bit positive here and reflect on that before we get to the somewhat less positive topic of today's show.
Yeah, because yeah, we're going to spend most of the show talking about that very cheerful subject of 9/11, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which were 16 years ago tomorrow.
Doesn't feel like 16 years, does it?
God, no. What the hell happened? Where the
like
hell
that.
did the last 16 years go? But we have some business to take care of first, though.
Yes.
And I think you know what I'm going to say. Where is Pierre?
Oh, this pisses me off. We've had some excused absences for him in the past.
Yeah, there was one last time.
This is not an excused absence. He's actually available. He wouldn't be here once he heard about the subject of today's. And the reason why, you want to know why he's not here?
Why is Pierre not here?
You don't know why he's not here. I'll tell you why he's not here.
Why
Honest to God, he is still pissed off about the freedom fries thing.
What? That was...
Yeah. I mean, come on.
Look,
I tried to explain. Look, this is just a bunch of it's a petty thing that a bunch of grown 6-year-olds did because they thought that they were being tough, and it's stupid, and everyone laughed at them, and nobody respects that. He just won't. He's still upset about it. 16 years later, he's still upset about the freedom fries thing.
So he's
actually available.
He's okay with all the other stuff that's happened in this country since then, but he won't come on our show, which we created with him and named for him, because he's still sore that some dipshits tried to rename French fries freedom fries after 9/11, even though that never got over and everybody thought it was a joke. He
can carry a grudge, and he's got some nationalistic pride, and this stung him right in it.
I can't believe it. I mean, I remember how pissed he was when he heard that Meryl Streep was going to play Julia Child. He was very sore about that.
I actually missed that one.
But, well, I could understand, I guess, because Meryl Streep was excellent, of course, but the movie itself wasn't that good. But I could understand why he was. But I mean, come on.
And the lesson about renaming food is that you can't give it some hyper patriotic name. Back in World War II, they tried to rename some German foods. Frankfurters became hot dogs. That caught on. We still call them hot dogs. Sauerkraut became Liberty cabbage. That did not catch on.
Not so much.
When you go with a patriotic name, people see it for the bullshit that it is.
Yeah,
you need something meaningless, not something patriotic, if you want to get that sort of thing in.
Right. Or if you're going to be patriotic with it, you also have to be clever. Like, for instance, if they wanted to rename Frankfurters Lincoln Logs, maybe that would have caught on.
Well, Frankfurters the hot dog did catch on.
Well, I know, but I'm saying if they wanted to do a patriotic deal with it.
No. Oh, okay. Fair enough. I didn't follow you there first. I got it now. The other thing is that perhaps Pierre is just making that. I think that it was serious, but perhaps he's just making that excuse so that he can catch the first Sunday of the NFL season.
Yeah, well, he is definitely a football maven. Pierre does love. He loves American
football or soccer football.
Well, he always calls it American football, so I assume that's what he means.
Okay.
When he means soccer, he just calls it football. He refuses to call it soccer.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a nationalistic pride again thing.
Yeah, again, So
fair enough. Yeah, I'm missing this I'm missing the opening day of football for this, and that's all right. I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too.
I'm sorry to be missing the game, but I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with missing football to do this as well.
Yeah, were you okay with missing baseball to do this?
Well, the thing is that there's a baseball game every day. There's not, it's not like there's like one football game. If you're assuming you just follow your team, it's just, you get one game a week.
Yeah.
Baseball, it's like, God, there's fucking 6 games a week. Yeah, I can miss this one.
Even the players don't. Even Cal Ripken didn't see every game during that streak.
Yeah. He was there, but he wasn't there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. All right.
Just go out and stand out there, Cal.
So it's going to be you and me and Pierre in absentia again.
Yeah, again. I don't know. This is 8 straight episodes, and I only count one excused absence. So
I think 2. Did we do the excused absence for the whole chasing Ramsey and getting into the hospital?
True. Yeah, he was captured and tortured or whatever. So I guess that's an excused absence.
Yeah. So he's going about 50-50.
Anyway.
Anyway,
Okay. So
so
yeah.
I guess we need to stop talking about depressing things like Pierre and get onto the fun topics like 9/11, right?
Yes, international terrorism. Let's talk about some of that.
Oh boy. So I'll start with this. Where were you when you heard? Because this is the thing that everybody, when things like this that happen, like the big generation-defining events or the events that everyone remembers where they were, seem to happen about every 20 years. You had 9/11. I guess 20 years before that, you probably go with the Challenger explosion, most likely.
Yeah.
In the 60s, it was JFK. In the 40s, it was Pearl Harbor. In the 20s, it was a stock market crash. It's about every 20 years or so.
Yeah. So in another 5 or 6 years, we'll be due for another.
I was told that somebody suggested that 9/11 was a bit different in that it was the first one where it wasn't just where were you when you heard, it was who did you know.
Oh yeah. And I was fortunate that I didn't know anybody.
Actually, I didn't either, but I mean there are a lot of people who knew somebody who was lost on the ground or on one of the planes.
Well, because you think, there were there were 3,000 people who were killed, which compared to the entire population of the country isn't that many, but compared to other
you go 1 or 2 degrees of separation, you're going to reach millions of people there.
Yeah. There's the number of people who even if they weren't closely associated, at least knew somebody who was in one of the towers or in one of the planes, or there's a lot of impact. It's a pretty wide radius of impact in terms of affecting people's personal lives. I was actually preparing my girlfriend at the time, and I were we were actually planning on driving to Toronto, because that was back before 9/11 when you didn't need a passport to go to Canada. And so I didn't even, and she didn't have cable at her place. So I didn't even get to see like footage, of what it looked like until later that day when I drove to meet her at the place where she worked and watched it on the TV there.
Just jaw-dropping, wasn't it?
Oh my God. And yeah, and it was one of those things because at first, because she had called me and just said, told me what happened, and I thought, oh my God, but it didn't really, like when you hear someone tell you,
it was just words until you actually saw.
Yeah, someone flew planes into the World Trade Center towers, and they collapsed. Like by the time I heard anything about it, all of the major events of that morning had happened, and then it wasn't until later that I saw, on TV what it actually had looked like, and then I remember a few days, I guess it was maybe a week or so after that, even when I was back at work, and the first Osama bin Laden tape was released, where bin Laden had he would record these videos and they would be released through, the Middle Eastern media. And of course, all the American media would pick it up right away and play it. And I remember standing at work and everything stopped. Like all the customers stopped. Everybody just stood around and looked at the TVs at work and watched as Osama bin Laden delivered this message to America in the wake of 9/11. And it was like something out of a movie. It was like the supervillain was talking to us about, what he had done. And it was surreal. It's still one of the most surreal memories that I have associated with 9/11, because I was conscious of it in that moment of looking around and everybody was fixed on the TV. Nothing else was happening. And it was just like a moment from like a Superman movie where the villain had commandeered the TV and he was addressing the population. I've never had an experience even remotely like that since. And of course, eventually those bin Laden tapes, a new one would come out every few weeks and we just kind of got used to it. And it ceased to be that big of a deal. But that first one, I remember
Survivor season 12. I've seen this before.
Yeah, exactly. It got old real quick. But the first time it was like, Oh my
Yeah.
God. And that was,
And that somebody would actually just stand up and say, I did this.
yeah.
Because I mean, that's going to get a response. People were not level-headed and rational in
Oh
the
God.
days
Yeah.
and weeks and months and years and decades since.
We'll get to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your experience when you first heard about it? Where were you?
I had graduated college. I still didn't have a job yet. I had my alarms. I was still sleeping, like 2 to 10, because I'm a night person. So I'd go to bed late. I'd wake up late. And I had the alarm set so that Dennis and Webster were the morning show on the local radio station. Used to catch like the very end of their show when they would toss it to next person DC Day. And normally they just have some little banter or whatever, get started off with some light, sometimes smile, they'd talk about different things. Okay. So the alarm went off and woke me up. The clock radio went off, not the alarm, but it went off, and I'm listening. They're talking about how the Twin Towers have been hit and all air traffic in the United States is being grounded. Yeah. I'm like, and there's the wait, what? This is completely this. So I got up real quick and I, got clothes on, brushed my teeth, and combed my hair real quick, and went downstairs. And by the time I got downstairs and put the TV on, the first tower had already collapsed. So I turn on the TV tower instead of Twin Towers. It's an only child, and there are stories coming in. They're showing the grainy footage from real far away because they didn't have all the shots and stuff yet. And they're talking about evacuating this area, and they have a rescue area that they're taking people to, and they were evacuating that because the remaining tower was starting to lean in that direction, and they were concerned that it was going to hit there because they didn't know if it did collapse. They didn't know if it was going to go down straight or if it was going to collapse off to a side, something like that. And I ended up watching the second tower collapse live on TV. I was home alone at that point. I think Dad had gone into work early, and then Mom had some sort of class, and she came home and she went to work later. But watched the second tower collapse on TV, and this seems a lot more surreal in retrospect than it did at the time, because the reality of what had happened hadn't completely sunk in yet. When you see something like that, you're waiting for a directed by Jerry Bruckheimer credit to come up.
Yeah, exactly.
And that wasn't going to happen. So I actually had something scheduled for like 11 or 12 o'clock that morning, because I had never bothered to get a driver's license while I was at college because I didn't need one. He couldn't drive on campus. So after I graduated college, I was learning to I was taking driving lessons in one of those cars that has a steering wheel on both sides. So late on the morning of September 11th, 2001, I and another student and the trainer were in a parking lot somewhere practicing parallel parking.
Wow. Yeah, that is pretty surreal.
And I explained, I was the one who told them the second tower. They heard the first one had gone down. I told them the second one had collapsed too. And we spent like an hour and a half doing the whole parallel parking thing. And then I came home.
Wow.
And Mom went to work. And then I sat at home and I went to the computer and put on CNN. You know how, and this was, 16 years ago, before there was all the video and all the data garbage, that this fills up all the website bloat.
Yeah.
But went to this site, and it was one page, had like a little bit of an image, like a small image, and it said, 9/11 terror attacks, and it only had like 4 sentences, and that was it. They took their entire website down, and they had a one-screen, mostly text image, because they were getting so bombarded that their website was going to crash with the data transfer if they didn't do something. And no other news mattered.
No.
And they didn't have any information yet. So they had the front page of the site was the entire site. Everything else was gone. There was not a single link. There was not a single video. There was one image. I'm like, wow, that is different. And I put the TM. Mom went to work around 1:30. And until my parents got home about 9 hours later, I basically sat in the house alone, following up on what was going on, keeping the TV on as the information trickled in, the new angles, the little bit of news, the other building collapsing later, and then when Mom would get home, I'd sum it all up in 1 or 2 minutes for her, so that here's the important stuff that happened. And watching Dan Rather slowly lose his shit, just like the rest of us, only he was on TV and had to try to hold it together a bit more visibly. Yeah. And because how can you not be affected by that and having to try to report on that?
Well,
and that I did that for like 3 days, because it's hard to explain how everything stopped when that happened if you didn't experience it. Like the news networks, like all the shopping networks, all the shopping networks went off the air because no one's going to be watching. So they said it was out of respect, but it was also for the fact that, frankly, no one's going to buy a goddamn thing on that day. And is just everything shut down. CNN and the news networks didn't air a commercial for like 4 days.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's for anybody watching who is maybe younger than we are and doesn't remember what that was like. It's difficult to describe other than to just say that it was the only thing that anybody talked about for what felt like a long time. I mean, eventually, after the first week or so, things gradually started to get back to normal. You know, the talk shows came back, and you know, the news networks sort of resumed their normal operations. But for the longest time, it was literally the only thing anybody ever talked about. When you saw somebody that you hadn't seen since before, you know, that's what you talked about. It was
and like the third or fourth day after, when air traffic started again, a jet went overhead near where I live, way out lower than normal, outside of the normal air traffic patterns for whatever reason, and people like cheered it. You know, seeing a jet in the sky caused people to spontaneously cheer.
Yeah. I've heard the actual attacks described as the most documented event in human history, because not only did it, I mean, maybe there's some technical, you know, answer that is more documented than that, but I mean, it took place in New York City.
Like that giraffe giving birth.
That maybe the giraffe giving birth might have beaten 9/11. But you know, it took place in New York City in the morning, so the city was full. There was, you know, 8 million people that lived there, plus however many more were there, you know, as tourists or in for business or whatever.
It was a perfectly clear day.
It was a clear day. Once the first plane hit, it was all eyes were on it. You know, every major news organization covered it. Every major news organization was all over the aftermath and the investigation. And it's one of those things where you talked about the other sort of generation defining catastrophes like the Kennedy assassination or Pearl Harbor. And those obviously were also, we're certainly in the same league as 9/11. And you know, with Pearl Harbor, I would argue, you know, more significant historically. But those weren't on TV in the moment. You know, most people didn't even know what TV was in 1941. TV wasn't commercially available till after the war. The Kennedy assassination, everybody knew about it fairly quickly thanks to TV and radio, but they didn't watch it live on TV when it happened. 9/11, people, like you described how with nobody saw the plane hit the first tower because nobody knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, there's one fluke chance they actually have video of that.
Yeah,
second shot of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, so and it was a little while before people actually saw that footage of the moment the first tower struck.
The first tower struck. You didn't see that for like a week.
Yeah, but the South Tower, because everybody was already paying attention when that happened. I mean, that was witnessed as it happened by millions of people.
Yeah, YouTube has like a 9-minute video of that impact where it's everyone's different angles, everyone they could compile, and it's like 9 minutes long. I mean, there's hundreds of recordings of that.
Yeah,
and people on their camera phones, and the camera phones weren't as common then, but people had, you know, video cameras, and it's filmed all over the place. I mean, everyone was looking that way.
Yeah,
and then people saw the plane coming in. It's like, that plane looks awfully low.
Yeah. And people saw the collapses. People saw the buildings fall. People saw the dust cloud. I mean, who could forget watching on the news and seeing that cloud of dust, like, just
running. Yeah, and you know, and it was one of those things where people still couldn't conceive it happened. If you watch the footage of it, or if you remember it, or more likely if you've seen it later on, I think it wasn't Dan Rather. I think it was it Brokaw? Or was it one of them? I think it was Brokaw when he was on the air and he wasn't seeing it. He was talking to somebody on the phone, and the person said the tower has collapsed, and Brokaw, or maybe it was Peter Jennings, I forget. He didn't get it. He said the side of the tower has collapsed, And the producer goes, no, the entire tower has collapsed. It was inconceivable that something like that could actually happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You were, because, well, it's one of the things that 9/11 changed in terms of our assumptions about terrorism, because up until then,
terrorism was absolutely an over there problem.
well,
It was,
and
well, I remember we even in high school we had a thing where one teacher was trying to get us to have a little bit of a discussion on terrorism, and I was actually kind of against discussing it. I remember actually saying that it was the sort of thing that wasn't relevant, that it wasn't the sort of thing that has an impact on our lives, that it affects some people, but it's not a problem that we would experience. I will have to admit that I am very, very wrong about that.
Yeah.
I really missed the boat on that one.
Well, and
but that's how we look at it. That was something that didn't happen here.
And before 9/11, when a plane was hijacked, it never even entered anybody's mind that they would intentionally destroy the plane. Like the plane was hijacked. It was, in the 70s.
They did it for the hostages. They didn't do it to weaponize it.
Yeah, in the 70s, there was a minor rash of what they called skyjackings, which was, terrorists would take over a plane, they would have a bomb, or they would say they had a bomb or whatever, and they would do it for money or to make a political statement or to demand the release of prisoners affiliated with their organization or whatever. But nobody ever thought, oh, they're going to crash this plane on purpose. So that part by it's because, I mean, people, when the first plane hit the North Tower, people assumed it was an accident.
Yeah.
People were like, how could this happen? What went wrong?
I understand some of the like air traffic professionals who, when they saw the size of the impact of the building, like, that's no private flight. That's when a lot of them became terrified of what was going on, because it's like that was not an accident.
No,
they knew it when they saw it, but the general public consciousness was, there's no way this could be intentional.
Yeah, and then it happened again, and it sort of dawns on you, oh shit. And somebody's doing that, and then there was that.
And Bush continued reading for 6 or 7 minutes without. It's like, this is the time we say we need to go.
Yeah. There's the then
it's not a secret that you're in that school.
Yeah, there are cameras. You should go. Well, let's. This is important business. You can leave now. Yeah,
but I mean, as far as the sins of George Bush go, that's in a lot of ways, one of the very minor ones that he stayed there as long as he did. But
I mean, if he had been anybody other than the president of the United States, you could forgive him for that sort of deer in the headlights reaction, because you're like, well, what else you're supposed to do? You're one minute you're reading to a bunch of school kids, and the next minute somebody's whispering in your ear, oh, hey, somebody flew a bunch of planes into the Twin Towers.
And the Pentagon.
And the Pentagon. The Pentagon's been, and there's another one that crashed in a field.
So the economic heart and the military heart were both hit on the same day.
Yeah. So, close the book.
And then I spent, for the rest of the week, because that was a Tuesday, and for the rest of the week, it was the same thing. I just sat at home and watched as the news trickled in slower and slower as the days went on. That was actually, that week was actually the last time that I missed my ex-girlfriend, because, and I don't think it was missing her so much as simply not wanting to be alone, because I was sitting in that house alone, just watching this horrific news pour in day after day. And for that, during the day, it was just me home, me and the cats.
Yeah, I know. I was I was living with people at the time. I was living with my best friend at the time and his girlfriend, and it was just, come home, turn on the TV, and that was it. I mean, there was nothing else to do. It's hard to
again, it's one of those things, the mindset's hard to explain, but even things started to try to get back into the routine. It took a full week. I mean, the NFL canceled a week of games. Major League Baseball canceled every game from Tuesday through Sunday and then replayed at the end of the season. Everything got kicked. Yeah. So it took until the next week, until like Monday or Tuesday, a week later, before people even started trying to get back into the routine of things. And like the late night shows came back, and everyone started with a teary, introduction about the whole thing and commentary. And Letterman, I think it was, came back a day before everyone else.
Yeah, Letterman was the first who came back.
He was Monday and everyone else was Tuesday. And he had a gift for knowing, what to say and showing the right amount of concern and outrage. I mean, no matter how bad the situation was, he really had a knack for it. But I mean, he did his little monologue sitting at the desk, and and they changed the beginning credits to the show. They didn't use the normal beginning theme for like a week or two, and then they had to edit it because the World Trade Center appeared in it.
Yeah,
and they had to take that out. And he was nearly in tears, and he wrapped up. And then his first guest was Dan Rather, and they were talking, and Dan actually started crying on the air, and then pulled himself together and apologized. And Dave's like, no, take care of yourself, and then kick it to a commercial break to give him a chance to recover. And nobody thought anything of it because that's how we all felt.
Yeah.
You try to explain now, talk show hosts were crying on the air, and it's like, what? But
it was yeah. Well, and one of my vivid memories is they had a fundraiser like a week, maybe 2 weeks after, and it was live on TV, and almost every channel carried it.
Oh, that was the big, with all the celebrities manning the phones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. Jack Nicholson was answering the phone.
I saw that. He was in the back. It's like, how surreal would that be to call to make a donation? You're talking to Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could tell, like, whenever they would cut to the phone bank and it was all these celebrities, they occasionally like somebody would wave at the camera, like, because the person they were talking to had asked for that. Yeah. And they were like, sure. Yeah, whatever. Hi, Yeah,
I remember Tom Hanks talking about trying to raise a great deal of money, and then they had Dennis Franz and Jimmy Smits were together on that, even though they hadn't appeared on the show together in like 6 years. They had the two of them together.
Yeah,
and and then they had the concert music. I must admit, I was disappointed that Billy Joel did New York State of Mind instead of 2,000 Years.
Yeah, I know.
2,000 Years would have been a much better song at that point,
But the first song, I think actually the opening of the entire show was Springsteen, and he sang an acoustic version of a song that surprisingly was not written for the occasion, but sounded as though it was so perfect that he must have. At the time, I assumed he had just written this brilliant song, in the past few days, because his song "My City of Ruins." That was actually written about something completely different, but was the perfect song for that occasion because it had a very spiritual quality. It sounded very prayerful. It was very somber and very sad. And that's still the emotion that I associate with it the most is sadness. I never really got angry about it. And I never really related, because, eventually there were everybody seemed like they wrote a 9/11 song. And, there was the Toby Keith song.
And there's a lot of the anti-Muslim outrage. A lot of people, it wasn't about reflection. It was about, okay, we're going to kick someone's ass now.
Yeah, exactly. That was the Toby Keith song. We'll put a boot in your ass.
That's what the government did too. It's like, somebody hit me, I'm going to hit back. It's like, well, who are you going to hit? Were they responsible? What did they do? How are you going to accomplish this? What is this going to do? How are you going to make things better? How are you going to stop this from happening again in the future? Don't care. I hit someone. I hit him good. That just seemed to be the way the approach that we took to it. And last year for 9/11, I did a video for my YouTube channel, and basically I didn't rewatch it for this because I didn't want to just repeat it. And if I watched all that, would be back in my head. But basically, the point I was making is that we didn't learn a goddamn thing from that, because we are still taking actions that encourage terrorism against the United States. We are still doing things that they talk about winning the hearts and minds of people, which is an important thing, but they didn't actually try to do that. You don't win hearts and minds by bombing people. I mean,
that seems like a fairly obvious first step. But
Bush started drone warfare. The technology got there while he was in office. Then Obama ramped it way the hell up, and it was wrong when both of them did that.
Yeah.
But I mean, think of it. People going about their lives, doing nothing wrong, just attending a wedding or something, and then all of a sudden, they get flying death from the sky. Something comes out of the sky and hits them, explodes, and kills people. Drone warfare. Sound familiar? Yeah. We didn't exactly, Osama bin Laden didn't exactly win over our hearts and minds when he did that. We're if that's your life, where America can bring death from the sky at any time, even if you're not doing anything wrong, you're not going to be particularly well disposed toward America.
No, and
There's
I
a
mean,
reason. There's a reason we're called the Great Satan by many people over there.
and from their perspective, it's a very good reason. Like, I think
Yes.
that's what a lot of people over, here in this country fail to understand is, they say, well, we've been attacked too. But while it's true that there hasn't been an event on the scale of 9/11 since
Well,
9/11, there
well,
hasn't
there was
been
never
any.
one before it either.
There was,
That's one
yeah,
of the. That's a generational.
but if you add up, all of the civilians that have been killed as a result in collateral damage since the United States began operations in the Middle East in response to 9/11, that
That
number
dwarfs
dwarfs.
9/11. It's not even
That number
close.
dwarfs. Yeah, it's
It's like 1,000 to 1.
yeah, it's so, and you could make the excuse of, well, it was accidental, they were collateral damage, it's a tragic, side effect of war. Okay, that's fine, but they're still
But
just
we've
as
done
bad.
it. But you can't hundreds of collateral damage incidents over 16 years. At some
Yeah.
point, at some point, you got to just say they don't care.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the hard answer is that, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, folks in the Middle East who bear a lifelong grudge against the United States are are behaving completely reasonably, because if there's this incredibly powerful country that takes liberties with your country, that doesn't respect your borders, that bombs targets within your borders, and then even when it screws up and kills people that were completely innocent, it doesn't care and it just keeps doing it. Are you going are you going to be filled with love and understanding for that country? Of course not. But yeah, we
And
took.
that's the thing about the counterterrorism efforts. If you're dealing with terrorism with terrorists, you've already lost the first most important battle. You need to
Yeah.
take the approach that people don't want to or don't see any reason to become terrorists in the first place. But you've got people lining up for suicide bombings because they're willing to die because they hate us and what we stand for so much because of the impact that we have on them.
Well, yeah, you have to solve two problems. You have to solve the short-term problem, which is find the people who actually did this, find the people who are directly or indirectly responsible for this act of terrorism. That's the short-term problem that you have to solve, and that's fairly easy to solve. I mean, it took us years to find bin Laden, but most of the terrorists who were involved in the 9/11 hijacking, the ones who died on the planes, they were identified fairly quickly. Most of their close associates were found and identified. Like the main organism of Al Qaeda that was responsible for 9/11 was rounded up and taken care of.
It was devastated pretty quickly.
Fairly quickly. I mean, of course, they rebuilt, and Al Qaeda itself continued to be a problem, but the main architects of 9/11 were dealt with fairly quickly. But the long-term problem is how do we stop making more terrorists? And that's something that we have never figured out, or never even really put too much effort into, unfortunately.
No, I mean, even we got rid of the Iraqi government and then just sort of backed up and had no plan, and the country descended into anarchy. And that's our fault, and we won't own it. I read, I don't know if it was it Jim Wright posted a link, or he wrote it. So I forget if it was him or not. Stone Kettle Station, but I think I found it through there, where somebody wrote that one of the big problems that America has had is that this country has not had a plan for victory since World War II.
Yeah.
Even if we win the war, we have no plan for what to do after that. And so it all collapsed back together again. We even though we took care of the architects of 9/11, the organizations essentially exist just like they did then.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about the military actions that followed 9/11, I would say both in Afghanistan and Iraq, was that when our government would talk to us about it, they would try to have it both ways. They would try to convince us that what was happening was extremely important, and that these military actions are incredibly necessary, and we need to support the troops, and support the generals and the president and everything. We all need to be behind this because this is really important. But at the same time, yeah, but it's not that big of a deal. and you should mostly just get on with your lives. I remember one of the speeches that Bush gave in the months following 9/11 that's become sort of infamous, where he told people to go shopping.
Yeah, and then you splice that with the you intercut that, go on and have fun, live your lives, and also they're seeking to destroy our way of life. They will kill every one of us. Go shopping.
Yeah, and it's sort of
there wasn't even a cohesive message.
Yeah, and it's almost
like the Republican Party hasn't had a cohesive message in like 30 years.
At least not one that they'll admit to.
Yeah, white supremacy and screw the poor, and
their cohesive message is white supremacy and poor shaming and shaming of women, but they won't come right out and admit that.
Except our president does now, and they're all mortified.
Yeah, like, he's not supposed to say that.
Damn it! Inside voice.
It's a dog whistle, not a people whistle. Get that people whistle away from him. But yeah, I mean, well, let's talk about the Bush administration, because there was, I remember it as there were the sort of the months in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 where we were all still very, very sore from it. And, you have a natural tendency, even though I was never a supporter of Bush, and I was a Gore person, and I had really hoped that would go a different way. He seemed like he was okay in that role of the sort of national leader in the wake of 9/11. He seemed to be trying to strike sort of a comforting tone, right, while also being strong and saying, don't worry, we're going to take care of this, and then there was this sort of slow dawning horror as the years went by, that a lot of us anyway, started to realize, oh shit, this is going really, really wrong. And it turns out he is the worst person who could possibly be president at this moment. And,
I was always struck by, right after the 9/11 attacks, they have like the presidential approval rating skyrocketed to like 94% or something crazy like that. And what it was, it's like, hey, there's a tremendous failing of national intelligence and thousands of people are dead. Yay!
He's our guy.
It was people wanted something to believe in, and they turned to the president. They wanted to believe that he was going to handle this properly. And I really see that whole thing as truly, there could have been, after the tragedy, there was great opportunity there. People coming together. There was an outpouring of sympathy for the United States in a way that you don't typically see from overseas. I mean, even other terrorist organizations were like, holy shit, that wasn't us. That's too far.
Yeah.
I mean, terrorists were horrified by what had happened.
The Ayatollah was like, we're really sorry about that.
And a really good leader, honestly, if Obama had been president at that time, probably might not have happened. But if it had, I really think he could have pulled together people in a way that Bush always talked about, but never even came close to accomplishing. There was a lot of willingness to make changes, to come together to try to address this, to deal with things reasonably. And what we ended up with was, you're either with us or you're against us.
Yeah.
Which I look at this because people were complaining about the French not participating in the post 9/11 invasion of the Middle East, and England did. And I always looked at it like, historically, the best international ally that the United States has ever had was France, not England.
Yeah.
We fought 2 wars against England. England's been at war with just about every country on the planet at one point or another. France, I mean, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for France helping. And basically, they did it just to stick it to England. They didn't really care about us at the time, but we wouldn't have won that war without French support.
They did us a solid, nevertheless.
And time goes by. A World War II, they begged us for help, but we didn't get involved until Pearl Harbor. And then, 50 years later, the grandchildren of the people who helped free France say things like, if it wasn't for us, you'd all be speaking German, and we expect them to be grateful. But
there's a lot of that goes around.
But when France didn't get involved in this and they were criticized, I'm like, France is being a good friend here. The good friend is not the person who says, yeah, I'll go along with that no matter what you say. The good friend is one who goes, look, you're angry, you're drunk, you should not be making decisions. I'm going to take the car keys away from
Right.
you. I'm going to take you over here. You're going to sleep it off on the couch, and we'll talk about it in the morning. And that's kind of what France was. It's like, no, we're not doing this. And England was like, hell yeah, we've got bombs. Let's use them. And America, there's always a demand to use the weapons so that we can make more of them. So in we went with very little plan and very little thought of what we're going to accomplish. I mean, we got the guy who tried to kill his dad, but we didn't really do anything to improve the country or to address the issues of terrorism. And now we have ISIS.
Yeah, well,
arose in the vacuum.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing about the Iraq War in particular was not only did we go in without a long-term plan, we
short-term plan, really.
Well, yeah, we went in without any justification.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a completely arbitrary, like, well, we're going to be over there anyway, might as well take care of this thing over here too. And yeah, as we see now, it caused so much chaos and destabilized that entire region of the world so dramatically that, yeah, I mean, when Trump says, Obama created ISIS, I think you need to go back one more. You need to hop back one more president. And again, not intentionally, but.
And of course, we've been interfering over there, making things worse for 50, 60 years. We're upset about Iran, but we overthrew their democratically elected leader and put in a puppet so we could get their oil. So, we can't really say that the problems over there have nothing to do with us and they need to clean up their act because we've broken it repeatedly.
Well, and I mean, people forget, because these countries have existed in their present state for the entirety of our lives. But people forget, Iraq and Iran as countries were the result of imperialism. It's not like the people of what we call Iraq got together and said, let's draw the border here.
Yeah, the borders were drawn by people like England and the United States without any rhyme or reason or consideration to the populations that were already there. And so people who are completely opposed to each other, not compatible or different religions, are suddenly thrown together and told, you're a country.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
and
not
we wonder
as
why
if,
it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as if everything was completely fine over in the Middle East, and then a bunch of people got together and said, you know what, let's do something fun. Let's bomb the United States. I mean, it doesn't. There's absolutely no justification for anything that they did. There's absolutely no justification for acts of terrorism and mass murder, no matter who does them. But to pretend that there was no motive or that there was nothing in American foreign policy that contributed to it is really the reason why we're doomed to repeat this cycle over and over and over again.
The mindset seems to be, I never saw it coming, therefore there was no reason that it came.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between arguing that, you can acknowledge that America is not completely innocent while also condemning the act.
Yeah,
obviously the 9/11 attacks are completely indefensible. They were one of the worst acts of mass murder ever committed. But you can condemn that and condemn the people that did it while also admitting that it was an indirect result of a century or more of meddling in other people's affairs with no clear plan for what we were even doing there other than our own immediate narrow self-interest.
Yeah, and one of the best descriptions of this I ever heard was actually written by L. Franken in one of his books back before he was elected, and I forget, I don't remember it verbatim, but basically he said that as a rule of thumb, and there are exceptions, but as a generalization, liberals like America like an adult likes their mother, and conservatives like America like a 6-year-old likes their mother. Yeah. The adult will look at it and say, wonderful person, but can acknowledge flaws, places where they're not perfect, places where he can try to do better. The 6-year-old loves mom, and anyone who says anything bad about mom is a bad guy.
Exactly.
And that's sort of the approach that we see here. And again, it used to be America, love it or leave it, or you're with us or you're against us. No, it's not black and white. And you can't take that approach and expect reasonable people to side with you.
No, no, you really can't. I mean, if you want to say Al Qaeda is bad,
Yeah.
like I can get with you that that could be a black and white issue. Yes, Al Qaeda is bad. We should stop Al Qaeda.
But apparently we
But
can't say that because we can't even say Nazis are bad anymore.
yeah, yeah. Well, but hey, but you know what I love? Here's what I love: the people who today are stepping back and saying, well, I just, we shouldn't condemn all of them about Nazis.
Mhm.
What do you think they were saying about radical Islamist terrorists? 15 years ago or even a few weeks ago. I mean, that people still are completely comfortable painting not just terrorists, but all Muslims, including the vast majority of peaceful people, with that same brush and
Yeah.
saying, oh, it's Islam. It's just that's the problem. But okay, well, what about Nazis? Well, let's stop and think about why they feel this way.
Well, it's okay if the white people are.
Yeah.
But it occurred to me it's some time ago that when I was growing up, we were in the tail end of being terrified of the communists. That was like the 30, 40-year thing. The communists want to kill us. They want to destroy us. They hate our way of life. And then the wall fell and the Soviet Union fell. And we kind of floundered for a bad guy for a while. And we tried immigrants to some extent. We tried these, but you couldn't really turn people against Americans. We didn't really have an enemy that, we could point to as a cause of all of our problems. And then 9/11 happened. Ding, Muslims. And
oh yeah,
and all of a sudden all Muslims were evil. They were monsters. They all wanted to kill us. And that opened the door to further turn Americans against Americans, because people who have been born in the United States, lived in the United States, have never left the United States, who are Muslim, are suddenly the enemy. And now the enemy is us. And we don't have the communists anymore, but 16 years on, we have people going to college who have spent their entire lives hearing that the Muslims are the enemy.
Yeah.
Just Muslims as a whole.
Yeah, and hearing that Muslims,
Muslim don't give it, are just as horrified as the rest of us, and don't just like most Soviets, most people in Russia, they don't care about us. They're just trying to live their lives.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard, especially since 9/11, how Islam is incompatible with Western values, and they don't talk about any particular school of Islamic thought. They don't talk about any
particular Western values.
Yeah, or any particular Western values. They don't talk about any kind of fundamentalist Islam or Wahhabism or jihadism no, it's just Islam.
Because they don't know anything about it.
Yeah, and they say, and it's like, Muslims have lived here since before this was a country, right? Like there's always been a Muslim population for almost as long as there has been a European colonization. There have been Muslims who have lived here, and the vast majority of that, they have lived peacefully and they have integrated into our society, and they've been subjected to the same prejudice that other non-white, non-Christian people have over the years. But they've never been viewed as dangerous, enemies of our civilization until in the last 16 years, at least not to this degree. And but yeah, you're right. People who are young, who are too young to remember 9/11, or too young to remember how things were before, and are just raised on this steady diet of those people are bad. That's where the terrorists come from. Keep an eye on them. Just the mere fact that they are adherents to a particular religion should be enough to raise our eyebrows and, give them a second look, because, there's a greater chance that they're a terrorist because they're a member of that religion.
To control people, you need an enemy. You need to keep them afraid. And so we have our new enemy.
Yeah.
We're approaching our third decade of our new enemy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the more I think about it, and I think about it almost every year whenever 9/11 rolls around, I feel like the problem was, and this is incredibly glib what I'm about to say, and it's incredibly reductive, but I think if you boil it down to sort of the emotional nub of the situation, when America reacted to 9/11, we reacted through our anger instead of through our grief. And that's why you saw things like military action happening so rapidly. But even 10 years on, there was still a struggle to pay for medical expenses from first responders, which is just mind-boggling to think. Like we were so quick to declare war in response.
Like, how can you claim that you're it has to do with your values and how you caring about life, and then you can't even provide medical care for the first responders at 9/11. And how do you get elected time after time when you clearly don't care about human beings?
Yeah, I mean, that should be, and I know, Jon Stewart said this multiple times. He was one of the people who were sort of cheerleading these efforts to get medical
And it might
care
not have happened without him, because he had the platform to bring the attention to it.
And one of the things he usually said was, this should be a no-brainer. These are the people who were digging through the rubble, like in the immediate aftermath when we were all watching.
The fires weren't out, and they were going through,
and to think that this is even a debate of, they have some medical expenses they've had, they've suffered as a result of chemicals they were exposed to or dust they inhaled on the mound. I mean, of course,
because part of those towers had asbestos in them, because it was determined to be carcinogenic and banned midway through the construction. So they stopped using it, but they didn't go back and rip it all out. So there was asbestos fiber burning for days on end.
Yeah, I mean, I just if I'm ever tempted to find just a sort of shorthand to describe where I think our reaction as Americans went wrong after 9/11, it was I point to something like that, where we followed our anger and we supported military action almost immediately, but we forgot our grief in the face of our anger so quickly that the people who were still suffering as a result of 9/11, even people who acted incredibly bravely on that day and in the weeks that followed, were still being left behind. We're still having to struggle to have their basic needs met. Like there was the Toby Keith song, which was all about war and death and putting the boot in their ass. And then there was Alan Jackson's song, which was all about sadness and grief and, just trying to cope, and it was treacle, was completely just sentimental treacle, but was beautiful sentimental treacle. And I mean, it's like, again, it's like, are you a Beatles man or an Elvis man? You're either the kind of person who listened to Toby Keith's song after 9/11 and thought, or you're the kind of person that listened to Alan Jackson's song and that resonated with you more strongly. And you thought, that's how I feel.
If the American way is putting a boot in your ass, what do you really think of America?
Yeah. I mean, you're not alone, clearly, if that's what you think. If you think that's when America's at its best, is when we're putting boots in people's asses, you're certainly not alone. I remember, because 9/11 was also one of the minor casualties of 9/11 was it revealed to everybody what a huge right-wing dipshit Dennis Miller is. And Dennis Miller, I often remember him saying, like, he supported the Iraq War, even when it was revealed that it was under faulty pretenses, because he said, well, I just feel like after 9/11, we had to go over there and put our foot down and show our wares.
No, you didn't.
And I'm just like, you are such a, how did anybody ever think that you were like the smart stand-up comedian? You are such a fucking clueless dipshit. Let's go attack some random people that had nothing to do with it, just to remind them who's boss. Man, fuck you. What the fuck is wrong with you? You're like,
I remember in like a week or two after 9/11 going through the various channels and ended up seeing excuse me, not everyone was clear on what a nightmare Fox News was at that point. But I'm going through and I channels the different news. I checked CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, and was on Fox News. And this person, the host, was arguing with some guest and referred to the America's security budget, like however many $100 billion to go into security and so. And he called it completely wasted. And even I think that's unfair. I mean, just because there's no denying in any way, shape, or form there was a catastrophic failure here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But completely wasted. You're saying that if we had no security budget, it would have been exactly this. I'm like, this is such a what a blowhard, what a load of crap. And I realized later that was my first exposure to Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, it would not be the last thing of that type that he would say.
No.
Well, speaking of stuff like that, I remember when in the wake of 9/11, when John Ashcroft, of course, was our Attorney General at that time.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And I remember him.
The best thing I've ever heard about John Ashcroft was the Onion article that says John Ashcroft blood donation eats through bag.
Yeah, he was, of all the bastards that were in charge of this country during 9/11, he was one of the most bastardly bastards of all of them. He was
he was also that same hyper patriotic "let the eagles soar" nonsense.
Oh, yeah, what goes through your mind? You say, I'm the Attorney General of the United States. I'm the chief law enforcement officer in the country. We just were affected by a horrible terrorist attack that killed thousands of people. I know. I'll sing this song I wrote. But what he reorganized.
And the sad thing is, he's probably still more qualified than anyone who's there now.
Oh God, yeah, I know. It's like, how bad is it now? Where you're like, I might take him instead of Sessions. He reorganized the Justice Department and reoriented like all of the priorities of the Justice Department so that terrorism was the top priority. And at the time, that seemed reasonable because 9/11 had just happened. But looking back, that seems just like an incredibly short-sighted reactionary thing to do, because this is the American domestic Justice Department. And obviously investigating terrorism should always be something that they're concerned about, because there are domestic terrorists and there are international terrorists that can come here and do stuff. That's something that you should keep an eye on. But should that be the number one priority of the American Justice Department? Looking back, I think, wow, that was, that should have been a sign at the time that we were starting to go overboard.
Extreme overreaction.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to put all our priority into the last bad thing that happened.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Yeah. I mean,
that's not a good long-term plan. That's reaction. Because that is purely reactionary. That's not understanding things. That's saying this happened, we're going to do this. You're not adapting. You're just reacting.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if there was a big asteroid impact, and it's like a nuclear explosion. Just a bunch of people were killed because a big asteroid hit the planet, and everybody said, "Okay, from now on, we're forgetting about everything but stopping the next asteroid." And there's like an astronomer over in the corner going, "Well, actually, we track the asteroids, and there's not another big one that's supposed to hit us for another 1,000 years. Oh, fuck that guy! We're going to stop all the asteroids."
That's actually better.
Things we should be doing.
I was trying to come with an analogy along those lines, and you came with a much better one than I did. So,
I come up with a good one every now and then.
You're better at analogies and segues, clearly.
Oh well, I would almost have to be, wouldn't I? I would almost have to be. So we've been going on for an hour about 9/11. Do you have any sort of final thoughts on the subject, and then do we want
to even remotely touch all the conspiracy theory bullshit on that?
We can touch it.
Let's touch 10-foot pole, maybe. I think that I would say that I think a lot of that comes from the same way that Bush's approval rating hit the mid-90s. It comes from a desire for there to be somebody in control, to think in some sort of sense. To some people, it's more comforting to think that the United States government was actually involved and coordinated this than that we simply got caught flat-footed by a couple dozen people conspiring in a cave somewhere.
Yeah.
There's comfort in thinking that there's somebody at the rudder, even if it requires believing something completely horrible. It's something horrible that somebody was in control of, and that's what I think a lot of this is looking for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's also with 9/11 conspiracies, and I think with conspiracy theories in general, I think there's this need that a lot of folks who cling to those feel like they don't ever have to trust anybody. You know what I mean? Like because if you figured out what really happened on 9/11, then you don't need to just, believe what the media tells you or what your government tells you, because you can find out the truth. You don't ever have to take anybody's word for anything. And that gives kind of a strange sense of confidence,
of superiority. People want to believe they're smart without actually doing the effort to be smart and knowledgeable. Yeah,
and that was something else that 9/11 sort of woke me up to, because obviously there were,
or as the one thing going around Facebook said, before Facebook, I just naturally assumed that everyone believed in science.
Yeah, and when 9/11 conspiracy theories, when the 9/11 truth movement became kind of a thing for a few years, in the aftermath of that. That was one of the things that woke me up to the fact that, wow, there are really people who believe this stuff. Because before that, there's like JFK conspiracies or moon landing conspiracies, and you think, oh, it's just a couple of
flat
kooks.
Earth conspiracies.
Flat Earth, yeah, the Illuminati, but you figure, well, that's just a couple of kooks, and they, it's like five people, But after the 9/11 truth stuff started, you start to realize, because there were people that I knew that I was going to college I started college a few years after 9/11. I was a non-traditional student, and there was a guy in one of my classes who was like in his 40s, also a non-traditional student, who was just the biggest 9/11 conspiracy theories. Like, if he handed out copies of loose change to people in class, and was just like a total InfoWars fucking guy.
You're giving us non-traditional students a bad name.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
loose change. I haven't even watched it. I did find a slip of paper directing me to it under my windshield wiper when I got out of a movie at the Cinemark some years ago, because people are trying to spread the word by putting shit under people's windshield wipers.
Yeah, that's a winning strategy, huh?
Yeah. It's like, have you ever considered using facts?
Well, yeah. I mean,
because facts are not on their side.
Loose changes is the most prevalent of them, but really any of those 9/11 conspiracy movies.
How's it pronounced? Zeitgeist?
Zeitgeist.
I've heard of that one too.
But yeah,
I haven't watched anything because I haven't been able to bring myself to. Like, one time on your Facebook page, somebody posted something about a video about flat Earth, and it was like 2.5 hours long. I got 9 minutes into it before I had to stop, and I got further than anyone else in the comment thread did.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible amount of effort for such a ridiculous concept with absolutely nothing that holds up defending it. I mean, the conspiracy theory needs to provide, how is this a logical, reasonable way to accomplish a given goal?
Yeah.
No 9/11 conspiracy theory can give any sort of explanation for why the government would do this way, why they would set it up this way, why they would frame what they were hoping to accomplish.
Exactly.
There are people who insist that the planes were landed and the passengers were removed, and then the planes were taken off again and crashed into the buildings, and the passengers were disposed of elsewhere. It's like, how is that simpler than simply they were on the plane when it was hijacked and crashed?
Yeah, it provides people who were unable to believe the truth with a far more implausible theory that for some reason they believe instead of the truth.
I did see one person one time, something online where I didn't go into any depth on it, but they were literally arguing that the towers were not hit by planes.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell?
Okay. Like, if but it goes to show you like why there are people who will believe that the earth is flat, because like but look, I can show you. I mean, it was on TV, the planes hitting the towers. It was on TV. There were millions of people in New York at the time who either saw it or experienced the immediate aftermath.
And there's footage of the actual collapse. You can see where the cascade failure begins, where the tower collapses, because the building was trusses. It had a core, and then it had the outer shell, and it was trusses in between. And one of the lines of firefighters is, don't trust trusses, because if they're made of steel, there's a fire, they get softer. They don't melt, but they get softer, and they can sag under their own weight. And then the trusses can actually slip off one end. Like, they're supported on both ends. They sag enough, they bow, and then it'll fall off one end, and then you have the cascade failure. There's actually, you can see the footage of the one tower where that cascade begins.
Yeah, and when you watch the footage of the collapsing of you can see it in both towers, but it's more obvious on the south tower because the plane hit much lower on the tower, where the collapse clearly begins at the point of impact of the plane. Right. It doesn't fall from the bottom and then it collapses.
People say it looks just like a demolition. No, it doesn't. A demolition starts at the bottom and the building collapses in. It doesn't start in the middle.
It looks actually what it looks like is a building collapsing because a plane hit it.
Exactly.
I mean, the collapse. And
people
at the impact point.
And people say things like, but fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel. It doesn't have to. It just
Nobody
has to.
said it did.
Have you ever baked? Have you ever taken a stick of margarine right out of the refrigerator and softened it first?
Yeah, it doesn't melt.
You don't melt it, but it's softer and it crushes under the pressure easier.
Yeah,
it's like never. It's like if you take the fork, you can take it right out of the fridge. You can put a jug of milk on it. It's fine. You soften it to the point it would crush it. And then they're saying like, but the building is meant to hold that weight. It's like it's meant to hold it. It's not meant to catch it once it's already falling.
Right. Exactly.
I'll hand you a bowling ball. You'll take it. But if I'm on the second story window and I toss a bowling ball out to you, you're going to get out of the way.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
You can hold that weight, but you can't catch it.
Yeah, exactly. If the top 30 floors of the building are falling, which is what happened when the South Tower collapsed, you can't expect, well, the bottom 70 will be able to hold it. Like, no.
And you can actually see in some of the footage each individual floor blowing out as the weight pancakes. You can see the windows on each individual floor exploding out with the crushing. And people are like, well, that's because they put the bombs on every floor. Are you fucking kidding me?
that nobody saw.
Yeah,
right? It's a professional demolition job that they just put bombs on every floor.
But they knew to put them below the point of impact only.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they clearly had it worked out. It's okay. He's going to crash the plane at precisely this point.
And then there's like things like floors below where like something will break out and some flames come out. It's like, well, they set that one off early. It's like, you have no idea what's going on inside that building. Come on.
I mean,
it's like all of a sudden everyone's an expert on skyscraper architecture.
Yeah, but they're such experts that, like you were just saying, I mean, if you look closely at the video that they are citing as evidence contradicts their argument. I mean, that's one of the most frustrating things about it is when people say, like, they'll make these very sort of superficial observations, like, it looks just like a controlled demolition. And then if you look at it for 5 minutes and you do like a Google search on controlled demolition and what they look like, and then look at what happened on the Twin Towers, like, oh no, that's obviously falling from the top, from above the point of impact. It's not what he's describing it at all. Yeah.
I mean, you can actually see the top of the building tip into the point of impact before it starts to fall, because that's
it's like I say, it was
it's more comforting. People would rather, they find the comforting lie better than the disturbing truth. They find comfort that somebody was in control of this, so they fall back on a comforting lie. You can't convince people of the truth when the lie is what they wanted to believe in the first place.
Yep. I mean, it's like the guy, in a weird way, it reminds me of this. It reminds me of a guy I heard about a few years ago who had sued a whole bunch of magicians, like Penn and Teller and David Copperfield and a bunch of other.
Let me guess, because it wasn't magic.
He sued them because he said they were misrepresenting themselves because
Isn't that why David Copperfield eventually started calling himself an illusionist?
Yeah. Well, this is why the guy sued him, though. It's even better than this. He said that they were presenting themselves as stage magicians, but he couldn't figure out how they did their tricks, so he was accusing them of using real magic. And obviously the suit didn't go anywhere. But it lasted long enough that somebody wrote about it and I heard about it. But that's sort of the conspiracy theorist mindset of, you can look up, like, for almost any big magic trick now, thanks to the internet, you can look up how they did it. Like, especially like one of my
secrets are not the thing they used to be. Not in this day and age.
I mean, one of my favorite magic tricks ever is when David Copperfield flies, and that there's an apparatus that allows him to do that is patented. Right? Like, you can look that up. I know exactly how he does it, but it's a very technical, messy sort of process. It's not as elegant behind the scenes as it looks when he does it on stage. Yeah. So I can imagine for some people it's much more pleasing aesthetically to just believe, okay, but he's just flying. When it looks like he's lifting up off the stage and gliding around, that's what he's actually doing. The real answer is a lot messier, but the magic answer is a lot nicer, a lot prettier, a lot more comforting. I personally prefer the real answer because not
Yeah.
only does it have the virtue of being true, but I think that it's
also impressively innovative.
yeah, it's exactly, it's ingenious. And when I watch that magic trick now, even though I know exactly how he does it, I still think it's amazing. Just like when you watch a movie, it doesn't matter. You watch the behind the scenes documentary of a movie you like, it doesn't ruin the movie. You can still get.
You mean there wasn't actually a Hulk on set? Oh, for God's sake. I'm not watching this anymore.
Just a dude with like fucking light bulbs on a suit?
They didn't actually blow up New York for this movie?
Yeah. There's not really a Batman? He was just an actor?
Yeah.
But yeah, so but that was definitely an eye-opener for me because that sort of stuff came out of nowhere, relatively speaking. And it's just sort of, having to confront the fact that there are a lot of people who believe this stuff, and because
you ask for information, they'll go research it, man, look into it, there's more going on, but they never actually tell you because it's one of those things where it's easier when it's more effective when you fill it in for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why
that's why it's like Trump is so good, because some of the stuff he just says vague things and people put the meaning on top of it that they want.
Yeah, and then he says,
should we go to the 5 minutes of Trump now, just to get this over?
Let's do 5 minutes of Trump, and then we'll wrap this baby up because we've been doing
we're pushing our 90 minutes here, so that's all right.
Okay.
So do we have it on screen?
We do not have an on-screen timer yet.
Do we have theme music?
No, we don't.
Do we have a graphic?
We have nothing like that at all.
Oh, welcome to Amateur Hour, everyone.
Hey, we're professionals. No, but
show number 8. We're on the ball.
But as I said in an effort to reassure you last time, I can see the timer. I can see it just fine on my screen.
The conspiracy theorists can see the truth.
Yes, exactly. I swear it's going to be, I see the timer. It's going to be 5 minutes. So I'm going to hit start, and we're going to do 5 minutes of Trump. So 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. So we picked up there. The conspiracy theorists leave things vague and leave you to fill it in. It's more effective to draw people in if you leave it up to the person who's listening to fill in the gaps themselves and put in what they already want to believe. And Trump does the same thing in his speeches. He'll make vague references and he'll refer to them, and whoever you don't like is suddenly them. And hey, Trump's on my side. Yeah,
and that's also how he's able to, even as blatant as he is, he's still able to convince his supporters that somehow he's not as prejudiced as he evidently is.
Well, because he can fool some of the people all of the time.
Well, and honestly, there are some people who let him off the hook for that because they're just as prejudiced as he is, and they recognize, it's like they know their own, and they're like, we got you, Mr. President. We're not gonna, we're not gonna let him get away with calling you a racist, even though you are one, and that's why we love you.
But it's still mean of them to point it out. I mean, I'm okay with the racism, but don't point it out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well,
call a spade a heart.
Yeah, he wants us to believe, like, with, since we did our last show, one of the many atrocities that he's committed is that he announced that he was going to cancel the DACA policy in 6 months, which would throw the legal status of 800,000 people who came to this country as children up into disarray,
and who have no actual path to legal citizenship as a result of the problems with the system already. DACA tries to help them so they don't have to, and they aren't eligible for welfare. They do pay taxes.
Yeah, they don't have criminal records.
They can't have a criminal record.
Yeah.
So basically, you're throwing out people who are not on welfare, they're not criminals. It's just trying to erase Obama. That's what he's about.
Yeah, well, and the most insidious thing about that particular action is when he announces, "Hey, I'm getting rid of DACA," right? But then he tries to disown it by trying to say, "Oh, I love the Dreamers. I love the people who the DACA, beneficiaries. I think they're wonderful people. I think they should stay." But it's just, I don't think that DACA was legal. Well, clearly you're not a constitutional scholar. You tried to ban Muslims with an executive order. You're not the best authority for what's
clearly you're not a scholar of any kind.
No, but that's the excuse. The excuse is, well, Trump just doesn't think that it's within presidential authority.
He does this. He says he supports the people, but then he's going to kick them out. But his supporters will say, but he tells it like it is. Well, you can't have this both ways. He's telling it like it is, but what he's saying and what he's doing are two different things.
Exactly. And as long as he's doing what he's doing, his words are completely meaningless. I don't care. I don't care if he gives a speech every day for the rest of his presidency that's all about how much he loves Hispanic people. I'm never going to believe it, because some of his signature initiatives, or at least attempts to start initiatives since he's been president, have been aimed at hurting Hispanic people. Mm-hmm. So I don't give a fuck if he tells me to my face I love Hispanic people. Why would I believe him? Why would I believe a word he says anyway? If he told me it was raining outside, I would have to look out the window. I wouldn't believe a word he told me. He's a fucking liar. Like, I don't understand. That's like a basic thing about Trump that still frustrates me that people don't get.
But you know what? I think a lot of people do get it. To them, it's not a flaw, it's a feature. Yeah,
but there are people who aren't ostensibly Trump supporters who still keep trying to sort of make space for him, or trying to take him at face value. And it's like, did you miss the part where he's a fucking compulsive liar, where everything he says is completely false, where he's just a self-aggrandizing narcissist, and he'll say anything he has to say to get what he wants?
How much time do we have left on the clock?
Oh, 40 seconds.
Okay, then we'll say the last thing about Trump. On 9/11, he was in public in New York with security guards, with actual police who, instead of being able to work with the rescue efforts, were guarding him because he was so important that he felt he deserved that on 9/11.
Yep.
That's the level of narcissist he is.
Yep. Hey, should we maybe go help with the recovery efforts? No, you stay here. Protect me. Was he even hosting The Apprentice at that point?
I don't. Who cares?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, that 2-1-0. That's it.
All right.
Minutes of Trump. Fuck that guy.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah. Anything?
I think that we've covered this, and I don't know that this is another one we can't really go into the normal geeking out on random stuff. Plus, we're already at like we're past the 80-minute mark, so there's not a lot of time left.
We're pushing the limits, and plus, I mean, next month we'll have plenty to talk about in terms of the geeky stuff, because by the time we do another show, the new Star Trek show will have debuted. So
right, and we'll be able to see how badly the government is fucking up Harvey and Irma response. Oh
God, yes. Best of luck to everybody in Florida who might be watching.
All the libertarians are very, very quiet.
Yeah. Just like all the Republicans in Texas. For some reason, they didn't raise as much of a stink about voting for disaster relief this time like they did when Hurricane Sandy hit a few years ago. All their qualms seem to have gone away.
It's because a large part of the core of modern American conservatism in the Republican Party is being a hypocritical piece of garbage.
Yep. That seems to be, they might as well just put that in the platform for the next convention. That should be number one. The Republican Party is dedicated to being hypocritical pieces of garbage. We will change our minds on any principle we claim to honor as long as it would benefit us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I guess that's it.
That's about it. Yeah. Because again, if we're not going to anything else, and I think we've covered 9/11 fairly well, reminiscing, talking about ramifications, results, and I don't really, and we even went to the conspiracy theory and said screw those people too. So and not real happy with Pierre right now.
Really not happy with Pierre. You even brought up the freedom fries thing. He could have talked about it if he wanted to.
Apparently, he didn't want to. He's holding a grudge.
Well,
I'll send him some Liberty cabbage.
Yeah. Hey, eat some freedom fries and some Liberty cabbage. Get over it, Pierre.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna go have some freedom toast.
He'll probably he'll probably complain that it's the wrong brand because he's a food connoisseur. You know.
Oh God, yeah. Is this sauerkraut from a can? Shut up, Pierre. I'm not making you like from scratch sauerkraut, okay?
This isn't an episode of MASH where we're digging it up. Congratulations, you've discovered sauerkraut. All right. I think that about wraps it up then.
Yeah.
And we'll be back at some point in October.
Yeah, I don't even know what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something.
Oh, I'm sure the disaster response will be high on the list because you know that it's going to be, it's going to be ugly. Yeah, because it's huge, and now it's going to be 2 places, not 1.
And hopefully there won't be any. We'll have enough of a respite that there won't be another hurricane bearing down. Florida
did go for Trump in this election, right? This past one.
Yes, it did.
Well, then they can rest assured that there's a chance that they'll get some disaster relief funding.
Yeah, they voted for me. Take care of those people.
Yeah. All right. Well, until episode 9, whatever that's going to be about on whatever date in October. Take care.
Thanks for watching, everybody.